Hey guys, David Robinson here. Welcome to the apartment investing journey. Got another great guest for you today, another great episode. I'm excited to have Anthony Vicino with us today. Anthony, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, and thank you for coming on and spending a few minutes with our listeners. You've got a great story. You got an interesting background, and you have quite a bit of experience in the multifamily investing space. So I'm excited to dive into your story. But a brief bio on Anthony: he is a best-selling author, real estate investor, and serial entrepreneur committed to helping people maximize their return on life. He is the co-founding partner of Invictus Capital, a multifamily acquisition firm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with $30 million dollars in assets under management. Invictus Capital provides busy working professionals with the opportunity to invest better. And as the host of the Multifamily Investing Made Simple podcast and author of Passive Investing Made Simple, Anthony firmly believes investing shouldn't be complicated, scary, or overwhelming. So you've accomplished quite a bit in the multifamily space in a very short period of time, and you have a great backstory, and I think that a lot of people will be inspired by and relate to. So if you can, let's back up and let's talk about that journey. Where did it all begin for you?
So I think real estate's really interesting because we all have some kind of relationship with the buildings around us. And for most people, and was definitely one of these people, we never stop to like consciously consider a lot of the ramifications of that relationship of like, okay, who owns these buildings? If you like really get down to like the brass tacks, you look at the single family homes and the mansions and you like assume, okay, Bob owns that one and Jill owns that one and some rich guy over there owns that one. That's easy to like get your head around. But then as you start going into like big commercial real estate and seeing like apartment buildings and offices, we almost like glaze over it and just assume like somebody owns it, but we never like really stop to like examine that question of like who's behind all this. And for me, like my real estate journey, actually, if you go way back, it started in college. My roommate and his dad were buying and fixing and flipping single family homes. And I was living with them to offset my rent. It was nice and cheap. I would do some construction. And all I learned out of that experience was that I can swing a hammer, but I can't hit a nail. And so construction wasn't for me. And that was like my first dipping my toes experience into real estate. And I was like, if this is real estate, I don't want anything to do with it. And I think that's what a lot of people think about when they think about real estate investing is you got to go buy a single family home. You got to fix and flip it like they do on HGTV. And if you don't have like the construction wherewithal, the time, the energy to do all that, then it's not a very good path. It can be, but for me, where I was at that point, I wasn't interested in it. So for the next 10 years, I kind of went off and did my own thing. I had no chance of ever cutting it in corporate America because I was I was a really bad employee. Like I was getting fired a lot. Like if I'm just being really, really frank about it, like I have severe ADHD. So coming out of college, like I was getting fired because I was like unfocused, unreliable, undisciplined, like the things that don't make for a good employee. So I went off and I was a professional rock climber for the better part of a decade. And then I started writing science fiction and fantasy novels. And that was all a lot of fun. It was kind of like sowing my wild oats where I got to live a life of extreme freedom and zero accountability. Like I didn't have to worry about what the world thought about like my life choices. I could just go live in the dirt and climb on rocks and write books. And it was great. Until I wanted to marry a woman and her parents were like, so what are you going to do to provide for our daughter? I was like, I don't know. That's a
Oh,
good
that's great.
question. So, you know, that like sometimes life's expectation and society's expectations of like what it means to be a good provider and like all that kind of gets like put in front of you in a way that you can't overlook. And so I started looking and saying, okay, how could I actually make some money? And that led me down the path of entrepreneurship. And the story is that like that woman, I ended up getting engaged and a year later she left me and like tore my heart out. And I was living in literally living in the back of a van, super in debt. And my buddy is like, dude, we got to get you out of here. So let's build a business. That was his solution was to build a business. And I was like, I know nothing about this. I wasn't entrepreneurial as a kid at all. Like you could not pay me to set up a lemonade stand. You like, I had no interest in shoveling for money, like not at all. But for whatever reason, at that point in my life is at a low point. I was like, I want to make money. I want to be out of this position in my life. I don't want to be living in this van. I'm ready to not just be free, but to also have control and be like responsible and give back to the world and make an impact. And so we built a business. And it was a high-rise window washing company, which utilized our skills as rock climbers, our network of rock climbing buddies. And that was great. Like that was where the bug bit. And I was like, oh my goodness, like building businesses is a ton of fun. It's really hard, but it's really interesting. And so that's what I did. I was like, I just went off and started building different businesses over the last 10 years. And along the way, real estate tried to insert itself again into my life, in the form of a friend coming to me when I was doing that window washing company. He's like, hey, I'm buying these quads. Do you want to do that together? And I was still thinking of like the fix and flip. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that at all. Like not interested. So, but I'll give you money and you go do it. So I passively invested before I even understood what that really meant. Like, realized the synergy of a partnership. And so we did that. It was a good investment, but still the bug, like the visor or the wool still hadn't been pulled back on my eyes. And I still wasn't asking the question, who owns all these buildings? That came about 6 or 7 years ago when I was back in Minneapolis. I was one day, whatever reason, like the eureka moment of like driving downtown Minneapolis, looking at the skyscrapers. And I was suddenly like, oh my God, who actually owns all these buildings? And it's such a small, silly question. And for so much of my life, I just kind of assumed rich people or institutions or whatever. And there's some truth in that. But as I started trying to unpack that question of like, who actually owns a skyscraper, I realized that like a lot of the real estate around us is owned by people just like you and me. In a lot of cases, they're just pooling the resources. And that got really interesting to me because at this point now I had started to build a muscle of building businesses. And I started to see all this real estate around me. It wasn't just sticks and bricks. It was actually, these were little mini businesses. And if you thought about the residents as customers, well, then it's like, okay, how can we deliver an excellent service to this customer better than the person across the street? And if you do that, then this seems like a really simple business model. And it was. And so I started doing that, like got a triplex on an FHA loan. So put a little bit of money down. That was an interesting experience, but it was a good one because it allowed me to continue growing and rolling my capital forward into larger and larger deals. And that's where we're at now is we just do, commercial real estate, apartment buildings focused here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And what makes us unique is that we're control freaks. So we try to control as much of the user experience as possible. So we have in-house property management, which means we handle the leasing, the residents, the maintenance, repairs, all the stuff that has to do with the families that we serve on that side. And then we also partner with passive investors to invest in these buildings, but they have no interest in doing any of the work. So it's cool because we get to make an impact on like the lives of our residents, the lives of our employees, and then the lives of our investors. So that's the really long, convoluted answer.
Love it.
But that's how we got here.
Well, and I appreciate that, and it's interesting, and there's a couple pieces of that I want to pull out, and maybe dig a little bit deeper on. I love the question, who's behind all this, or who actually owns these buildings. I agree with you 100%. Sometimes we just sort of gloss over that idea or that the way of looking at that type of real estate, residential real estate, homes. Condos, townhomes, all that seems to be within grasp to most people. But the minute you start thinking about larger commercial multifamily and apartment buildings, it seems to be beyond what we're capable of. And until sort of that veil is broken and you sort of see behind the scenes and you realize, oh my goodness, yeah, it really actually is possible. That along with your your early life of this concept of freedom. And you said something which you may have just said naturally, but you said, I'm ready to not just be free. Mm-hmm. And that was something that stood out to me when you said that, because a lot of people are seeking this concept of freedom, mm-hmm. right? And they pursue it, and in some instances achieve it, but you can be free without having a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Or without having much of an impact on anybody or anything. What you were saying there is that you're ready to not just be free, because you lived that life of freedom, mm-hmm. but you weren't having an impact, and it sounds like you weren't in a place financially that you were really excited about. So talk to me about your thoughts on this concept of I'm ready to not just be free. What did that mean to you? Because that's what I took from it, but what did that mean to you?
Yeah, and that it's interesting that you pick up on that, because I think that's actually one of the most profound concepts that I think a lot of us just overlook. And I did not stumble upon this one myself. This was actually pointed out to me by a mentor when was this? This was, I had built a couple of businesses at this point. Um, and he said that responsibility is the price of freedom. And that framed this thing that I had been chasing for a while in a new light, which was the idea of the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. And on the one hand, the science of achievement is like, if you do X, Y, and Z, if you build a business in this way, if you put in the hours and train like this, then you can be the professional athlete. You could build that successful business. Like achievement is very much a formula in a lot of cases, but fulfillment is an art, and there is no cookie cutter explanation. I can't show you how to be fulfilled because it's going to be different for you today than it is going to be tomorrow. And it's definitely different for you than it is for me. So I can't teach you how to do that. And the problem I was running into when I was climbing and I was free is that I was achieving, but I didn't feel fulfilled. And the problem is I was trying to fill the hole inside of me with achievement. And I think a lot of us do this. I think a lot of high achievers do this without recognizing that these are fundamentally different mediums. So fulfillment is like at its core, it means that I'm not filled, that there's a hole, right? And if we think of it like asphalt, like a road, and it has a pothole in it, there's a hole in the road. It's not filled. But if I come with my achievement, which is like a bowl of spaghetti noodles and put it in the pothole, I filled the pothole, but not in a meaningful way, right? And so that's like where I was in my life, where I was doing all these things and I was achieving, but it wasn't leading to the fulfillment. Like the freedom wasn't leading to the fulfillment. And I think a lot of people, they think about freedom as this thing that's like far off. It's like, you could have it right now. Like if you're listening to my voice, like really unpack this. Like if you're able to listen to my voice, it implies that you have access to some high level technologies right now, that it presumes that you're living a quality of standard of life, that if you wanted to, you could go be completely free right now. It would cost you. It would cost you your job, maybe it cost you your family, it cost you the things around you, but you could do that if that's really what you wanted. At the end of the day, it's not really what people want. Like they don't really, really want just freedom. They want to have an impact. They want to have a life of meaning and purpose. And sometimes that means, trying to take on the heaviest loads that we can, that would then allow us to make an impact on the community, the people, the lives of everybody around us. And so that's, I'm still trying to unpack this because I still find myself trying to fill that hole with achievement. So it's a process.
Well, you've been on this journey of filling that hole, and you've accomplished quite a bit. You've built multiple businesses. You've got $30 million of real estate under management. What does your life look like today, and what are you involved in from a business perspective and a real estate perspective?
Yeah, so my life is, I'm pretty blessed. I love my life. I get to live a pretty cool life. So I'm involved in a couple of different businesses. I have a manufacturing company in real estate. I write a lot. And so I have my fingers on a lot of different things. And for me, my highest value, I thought it was freedom for a long, long time. It turns out my highest value is creation, like the ability to create, whether that's through the written word, the spoken word, or just go build something. That's the thing that like really sparks my soul with joy. Because at the end of the day, it's never like a comparison. It's never a competition. It's just you created something out of nothing. And so I try to be really tyrannical with my schedule so that I have as much time in the day to create as possible. And that's only possible because I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by great people, like incredible teammates and partners that allow me the space to do what I do best, which then enables them to do the things that they do best. And so my day-to-day, like I mentioned before, I have severe ADHD. So one of the interesting things about that is when I was young, I thought I rebelled against structure and discipline and because again, freedom. I wanted to be free, not realizing that when we choose freedom, like it comes with the tyranny of infinite potentiality. Like there's so many different things that you could do that you'd never end up making meaningful progress towards anything. And I think that feels pretty bad. So what I discovered later in life was that if I created like really rigid schedules and discipline and said, this is what I'm doing with every minute of my day, and I block it out for myself, and then I hold myself to it as though I am my own boss, I get a lot done. But the things that I get done are the things that I want to get done. So it's like it's not just you know letting your schedule dictate the life that you live, but saying, I want to live this particular life. How am I going to schedule that? And so that's what I do on any given day. I try to create as much as possible. I try to be accountable to my team as much as possible to help them learn and grow as a leader. That's really what we do now, is trying to, instead of being the person on the stage in the spotlight, trying to learn how to be the person behind the spotlight and shining it on the team and helping them step into their greatness. So that's what my life kind of looks like.
Love it. Yeah, it's great. Let's pivot and let's dive in a little bit deeper into your real estate business. And let's talk about how things sort of came to be, what's, the company now, Invictus Multifamily. So talk to us a little bit about how that business came about.
So, my partner Dan and I, we both started individually on our own. And like I mentioned, I did the FHA route on a triplex because I knew I wanted to be in real estate. I wanted to start small and understand the systems and how these businesses work. And once I gained confidence, I wanted to start scaling. And Dan did something very similar. He started with a 6 unit, so slightly bigger, but always with the idea that he wanted to keep scaling. And that's great. You can do that, but you can only go so far on your own. It's like that phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And everybody in real estate will experience this at some point where you'll just run out of money. Like doesn't matter how much money you got. If you just are always buying, you're going to run out eventually. And you're going to run out of time. And one of the things that's cool about real estate is it's very scalable. If you understand the systems and the processes and who needs to be in which seats, then you can scale very effectively. And that's what I was doing. And that's what Dan was doing separately. And we met at a conference a number of years ago. And it's really interesting because we met at a conference where him and I are both really introverted. So like this, you got to like preface the story with it. Like I go to I'll share this. And this is like not a proud thing. Something I'm very embarrassed about, but like in my early days of real estate, and it's still something I struggle with, I would go to networking events and I'd have to get myself worked up to even like make the drive across town. And sometimes I would get across town, I'd get in the parking lot of the event. I'd be so stressed out. I would just turn around and go home. Like I would get all the way to the door and go home. It was not great. So the time when Dan and I met, I went into that event and I said, I just need to meet one person. That's my only goal. It's a 2-day event. I just got to meet one person. So I go into the conference center. There's people everywhere. They're sitting at literally every table except for one in the back corner. And so that's where I go. I go sit at the only table where there are not people. I sit down, and a couple of minutes later, Dan sits down next to me. He's like cut from the same class, super introverted. But we strike up a conversation. He's the one guy I met at the conference. We get lunch, we become friends. Months go by, and neither of us was thinking about partnership until 4 or 5 months later of constantly, engaging and staying in touch, that we realized we have really synergistic skills. He's really good at finance and I'm really great at systems. And like those two together was like a match made in heaven. And so we partnered. And the question that we always get from people is like, how do I find a partner? And I think the mistake, it's so easy to make, is like you're going to the bar and you're just walking up to the first woman you see and being like, will you be my girlfriend? And it's like, that's a weird way to like get somebody to go out on a date with you. Right. So like you have to show up, you have to go to the bar, but you have to leave space for the universe to like fill the void of the thing that you're seeking. So we started partnering, and that was an interesting moment in our life because a lot of our friends and family and close connections were noticing the success that we were having with real estate. And they were like, can we invest with you guys? And we're like, okay, sure. Like we can do that. We have to figure out what that looks like. But for so long, we had been doing it just on our own. And that was important to us because it meant like we had paid the tuition at the School of Hard Knocks on our own dime before we ever took anybody else's money. And once we started partnering with other people, it became like this really empowering thing where it's like, wow, my sisters, I have 6 sisters and 2 brothers. They they have, they would never invest in real estate on their own. So for me to be like the conduit through which they get that opportunity is like one of the coolest things. So like
Mm,
it was this opportunity for impact that when I first got into real estate, I had no clue that it was going to lead me to that place. But now that we're here, it's like the favorite thing that we get to do is like serve our investors and serve the residents. So
yeah,
that's a
love
long
that.
answer.
Well, and you mentioned, how you met Dan and how that relationship sort of naturally came about. How do you guys divide responsibilities inside of Invictus Capital? What does
Mhm.
that look like for you? I think there's a lot of our listeners that are in that phase. Either they're looking for someone that can complement their skill set and their
Mhm.
superpower, or maybe they're there already and they're struggling to define roles. How did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, this is I would recommend go out there and find some kind of operating system that you can plug into your company. You know, for us at Invictus, we use Traction, the EOS model. At one of my other companies, we actually use the 4 Ds of discipline or of execution. It's a different model. Like there's no right or wrong answer. It's just about finding one that you're going to utilize, and that works for us. And the way that we think about the company is there's like 3 legs to the stool. There's the acquisition side, there's the operation side, and there's the finance side. Acquisition is, we need to have deals and we need to have investors. And so that's what you would largely think of like marketing and branding. And like, how do we get new opportunities and how do we get new investors to fund those opportunities? The operations is unique to us in the sense that we have in-house property management. So we actually have to bring these assets in and then operate them. And so that's its own stool or own leg of the stool. And if that one goes out, the whole stool just falls over. And this is the problem I think a lot of new investors forget is that it's great to buy the building, but that's only getting you into the game. That's only like buying the ticket to show up at the game. Now you got to go and like actually win the basketball game or whatever. I don't think you have to pay for tickets to play. I don't think that's how it works. But,
We got it. We got
I'm not a
it.
sports guy. A third leg is the finance side, which is like, and this is for all businesses, is that you need to understand your cash flows and how to run, based off of balance sheet. And like, if you don't understand that, your business is never going to last very long. So the way that Dan and I really think about these things, he handles the operation side of the property management. He's accountable and responsible to that, and I supplement where I can help. Right, but at the end of the day, it's his leg. For me, I'm the acquisitions leg, like bring in deals, bring in investors, everything around that. And then the finance side, that is also Dan, but it's one of those things that as a partnership, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking about being a partner, like you can never fully delegate understanding the financials. That is a good way to get really screwed over someday. Not intentionally necessarily, maybe intentionally, but you need to be very, very competent in each one of these legs of the stool so that you can be certain and confident that you have a great partnership. I coach a little bit with Jake and Gino, and talking to I had this guy a couple of weeks ago. I was talking with him, and he's like, "Yeah, I had a partner, and we were going great. We did all these deals. He was managing them and running everything down in Kentucky, a couple of states away from him." He's like, "Next thing I know, the guy disappears, and like all the money was gone." So it's like, that's rough. So, but in general, I think pretty much every business can be thought of as acquisitions, operations, finance. And it's not real estate, it's marketing. How do you get new leads into the funnel? Then operations is the fulfillment. Like, how do you actually fulfill on that product or that promise to the customer? And then the finance is always the same. You got to be able to run based off of cash flows.
Yeah, love it. So, what do you see on the horizon for your company with Dan? I mean, if we were to project out over the next 3 years, what does this thing look like for you? What's the vision?
Yeah, I think a lot of people like to think in terms of units or assets under management. And I actually really hate those metrics because like when we talk about like $30 million under assets under management, it's like, what's that really mean at the end of the day? That can mean so many things. And when it's like, oh, it's 300 units, like what's that really mean? Like, do you own all those yourself? Do you have like 1% ownership in it? Like it's such a moving target. And so I don't think those are the most helpful. I understand why we have to present in those ways because it helps people kind of frame things.
Sure.
For me, like it's the least important in the whole scheme of things. what I get really jazzed about is serving families. And like for me, that's how many families on the resident side, how many families on the employee side, and how many families on the investor side can we serve? And then thinking about how can I serve them in a way that isn't really about the product that we deliver to them, but rather the company. Like how can we build a company that isn't about me and it's not about Dan, that it's about the people underneath of us. It's about the systems, the processes, and the culture that it outlives us. And that's what I want to build. Like I love building systems that it's the ideal that you never get there is like the self-perpetuating machine, where it's like once it's good to go and you get the right people in the right seats and they have the systems to succeed, then the machine can just thrive. And that's really what I'm fascinated in trying to build.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think naturally, as you're focused on more of that holistic approach of, how can you impact others and how can you build something that takes on a life of its own, you're going to make the right decisions to push the business along. I want to start to wind down here a little bit. I've really enjoyed our conversation, sort of getting some insight into your mindset and how you think about things and the backstory about how you built the business that you built thus far. As we start winding down, a couple questions. The first is, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing in your business right now?
Well, this is easy, and it's not just right now. This is if you're in business, like this is going to resonate. The hardest part about business is people, always, whether that's customers or that's employees. Specifically, employees and team and culture. It's so hard to build. It's a daily battle that you have to go to war over, and it has to be one of the most important fights that you fight. And right now, I think it's particularly difficult with the whole great resignation and people not wanting to work as much. And I understand it. That just creates unique challenges for us to create an environment where people do want to work, where they get excited to come in every single day. And I think that's the unique challenge. So definitely people.
Great. What's something that you're just absolutely crushing right now in your business that we could all learn from?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if we do anything that's so outlandishly great. What we do is we try to never be too big to do the fundamentals, to never be too like proud or too good to tie our shoes properly. And I think that's what we do pretty darn well, is that we show up every single day and we don't look to put 100 points on the board. We just look to every single day just keep doing our best, put 10 points on the board, 10 points on the board over and over and over. And so I think it's our maniacal focus on the mundane, I think maybe is what gets us through.
Love that. The maniacal focus of the mundane. That's great. Well, look, this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed, hearing your story and learning more about you and what you have going on. Any final thoughts for our listeners that may be looking to get into the multifamily space? Any advice or final thoughts for them?
Do it, obviously. There's so many ways that you can get involved. Recognize that there's an infinite multitude of ways that you can get involved in real estate. That's fix and flips, multifamily, it's syndications. Like there's a lot. Don't get so tunnel visioned on one or the other that you just become oblivious to the fact that there could just be an opportunity right here. But on the other side of things is recognize that this is a really long game. Like real estate is the best get rich slowly but surely plan out there. There's no quick way to get there. And if you just keep showing up every single day and doing the work, and the work never really looks sexy at the time. Like if you look at my schedule, you'd be like, that's it? That's what you do? It's like, yeah, that's it. Like it doesn't look like much, but if you do that enough, it's going to add up. I promise you. So figure out what are those KPIs, those few levers, because there's always one or two levers that if you pull them, they have disproportionate magnitudes of effect. Go find those levers, forget all the others, and just pull the hell out of those levers until you can't pull them anymore, then move on to the next one. And that takes a lot of self-awareness, takes a lot of diligence and a lot of discipline.
Love it. Well, Anthony, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about what you have going on?
Yeah, you can find me at invictusmultifamily.com if you're interested in learning more about investing and what we do there. We have a book that just came out back in August, and that hit #1 on Amazon, which is always really cool.
Congrats. That's great.
If you're interested in learning about passive investing, that book is really designed for people that have they've never stopped and asked a question like, what is all this real estate around me, right? So it's a guide for people to go from beginner to being like, okay, I know enough now to actually meaningfully participate in this vehicle. So if you'd like a copy of that book, just shoot me an email. Actually, it's available on Amazon. You can pay for it, but if you shoot me an email and say you heard me on this podcast, then I'll send you a free copy of the book.
Awesome. We'll have links to some contact info to invictusmultifamily.com, as well as your personal website. And I'm sure they can get a copy of the book from your personal website as well. Anthony, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your journey with us. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.